Alright, so typically, before I start these vehicles, I take some pictures, take some after shots, and then post them on my website. So, figured, been having this GoPro for a while, start doing a little bit more with video, trying to video them before, kind of during the process, and after, just so people can see kind of how these vehicles end up making their way to me. So it's pretty interesting what I get to deal with. This is some kind of homemade fuse panel out of a dry box of some sort. Got some interesting wiring here. We have just wires running really everywhere and across everything. Ground's kind of just tucked up underneath the battery post. We have wires going down here to something. We have some cube lights on the front. They're kind of just connected with a tie wrap and kind of just butt spliced in right here. Found an interesting wire here, just bare copper wire just sticking up in the air. Not really sure what that's about. Doesn't really get all that much better coming in. You got just random wires kind of just hanging down everywhere. That's just on the floor by the gas pedal, so I'm sure that's real safe. More random wires just going everywhere. So here's a little bit closer look at under the dash. So I'm not real sure where any of this really goes. It's gonna take a little bit of time. There's some more random wires going somewhere. It's gonna take a little bit of time to figure out what all this mess is. We've got some more cube lights just kinda coming through the door here. Kinda looks like the door would smash them every time you close it. Yep, it sure would. So we'll have to move those wires for sure. So really step one is going to be yanking all this out. And there's really no sense in trying to repair or tidy or fix any of this up. Got a 30 amp fuse on a 12 gauge wire feeding 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 110 amps worth of circuit. So there's really no real good way to fix any of this. Step one's going to be just rip it all out and just start over. So that's what we'll do. So digging in this a little bit further, not the world's worst I've ever seen. I have seen some much worse installs. They attempted to do fuse protection relays in order for higher current draw. Just the way they went about it was interesting. Like I said, you've got over 100 amps of theoretical current pulling through a single 30 amp fuse and a single 12 gauge wire, or maybe even 14 gauge wire, with a corroded butt splice connector in between anyway. But the other thing that's a bit scary is all of these exposed wires that are running just sitting on top of the engine here. Those are actually 12 volt positive switch legs coming from switches inside. So instead of sending a ground signal to turn these relays on, they sent a hot signal all the way through the firewall, through the cab, through everything, which is not the end of the world. I mean, it's perfectly acceptable, assuming that you do some type of protection for the wiring. So any of these wires could have very easily chafed on any metal. I mean, they're just sitting here laying around, and they're all hot. So not the best case scenario. Originally couldn't figure out why this switch panel he's got here was not working. It didn't work off ignition, accessory, turning any of the switches on didn't activate it. Well, I figured out in this bunch of, there's another random fuse, I don't know where that's going. In this bunch of wires, they had created their own on-off switch. So to turn this panel on and off, he would just undo this wire here, and that would turn his panel off. So every time he wanted to turn this panel off, they would just unplug this quick connect, and if he wanted to activate the panel, he would plug it back in. We'll go ahead and fix that proper. So looks like I figured out where a lot of these loose wires went at one point. Looks like there was a switch panel here at one point, and some of these circuits were tied into there. The customer who brought me the vehicle purchased it recently, so he's not really sure what happened before he got the vehicle. It's not a daily driver or anything, it's more of a play toy, so he's not 100% sure what happened here. So we're continuing on, we're getting it cleared out and figuring out what's what. It's always the best idea, I think, to take and tape your hot wires to the metal chassis of the steering column. These wires here were just taped the whole way, just directly to the metal chassis. No fuse protection that I can see anywhere on it, so just waiting for a nice day to create a fire, I guess. So here's an interesting one I figured I'd share. So this is the ground for a Wet Sounds sound bar. It is up on the headache rack. So instead of just, if this is where you were gonna ground it, instead of just using one of the already 3 existing self-tapping screws in here, they actually just used that wire and bolted it together and then taped it. What's scarier is it looks like the factory radio was pulled out one time, and they're using the factory radio ignition to power the Wet Sounds, and they did the same thing, and this was just taped. The interesting part about it is the fuse is behind the bolt, so if it were to short on something, you would be relying on hoping that whatever it's connected to factory somewhere, if it is fused. And then not to mention, you've got a 25 amp fuse and probably a 12 gauge wire, maybe 10 gauge, looks more like 12, going to a 18 gauge wire. So this thing is obviously not, this wire here is obviously not able to handle the current that this device is going to take, so that's going to be relocated as well. So I'm going to try to get a good angle in here to see if you can see. One of the primary complaints the customer had was that the radio wasn't working. Well, I traced back the circuit they had, and this is where it's going. So not the best idea to just pop a wire directly into a open spot on a fuse panel. Yeah, I do know they make fuse blade spades that add a circuits and things like that, but Still not the best idea, obviously. We wouldn't do anything like that, but you know, that would have been far better than just jamming the wire into the empty slot. So we'll get that cleaned up and addressed too. So trying to figure out where this wire goes. Found it up underneath the Jeep, followed it back, and it was tied into that fuse panel, so it was hot, and this is where I found it. They had some tape on it that came off, but just stuck into the frame rail. Somebody had taped it off and condemned it, but left it hooked up. So not really sure what it's here for. I can't really find any reason why it should be here. So I guess we'll have to continue searching. So here's where we're at. We removed the made fuse distribution blocks. Get rid of all the wires on this back cowl. We unhooked these, so we're going to rewire those. We unhooked the cubes there, so we're going to rewire those. I did find, while we were doing this, that the ground strap to the hood was disconnected, which is not the biggest deal, but the ground strap from the body to the engine is broken. So I'm going to get with the customer and just see if he wants to replace it with a new ground strap, or if he just wants me to build a you know, like a 4-gauge ground strap instead. He was complaining of some electrical issues, sporadic on this vehicle, but you know, that's probably not all of it, but it's definitely not helping. I think a lot of it was the random wires going everywhere, popping fuses at random times. Inside we have gotten most of this in here kind of wrapped up and cleaned up all the extra wires. The only thing that's left in here really is the factory stuff. I have to trace this wire out. I have to pull the dash pad back. It goes up, way up into the top of the dash, and it's not factory, it's definitely aftermarket, so I don't want to get into that camera works right now, so we'll attack that tomorrow. Got that fuse panel out. There was a ton of extra wires for the radio that somebody did at one point that I showed earlier. We're gonna get all that cleaned up, get that all protected and tucked out of the way. So that's where we're gonna leave it for today, and we will get started doing some rewiring. Once we get some parts in, we'll get it back together for them in one piece. Well, this is a lot of what we pulled out here. Some other wiring and stuff that I just trashed. It was just shorter pieces bundled up, aggravating me, so I just threw them in the trash. But that's what's there. Likely reuse some of these relays to feed a new fuse distribution. These are just standard Bosch style relays, so nothing wrong with those.